down there. He just mans through it. He's like, hurricane, bring a hurricane on. Although then his house flooded out.
Yeah.
Shall we?
We shall. We're going to take it from the top.
From the top. Here we are in Rochester, New York on a sunny day with Christopher Price, an attorney in Naples, Florida. Live from Naples, Florida is Mr. Price. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. It's not quite that sunny here today. It's a little bit rainy, but
it's Florida. That's supposed to happen every day.
Exactly.
And Chris and Beth have recognized their allegiances to Florida State. Both run pretty deep here.
Yes.
And I want to make a shout out, since Chris is here, to Pelican Larry's and Grouper and Chips, because those are in sunny Naples, Florida. But Chris, the real reason why you're here on 6 Minute Increments is to talk a little bit about your background, your practice, and actually, I think for New Yorkers who are always interested in coming to Florida, what it's like to be a snowbird and the residency requirements, and a little bit of information about that.
Sure. So just by way of my background, kind of give you the condensed version. First 10 years of life were up in New York, New Jersey. Last 35 have been in Florida, kind of all over the state. I moved down to the Space Coast region. Middle school and high school in Satellite Beach. So, from the beach side, if there was surf, that meant there was no class. So that was kind of an interesting experience. From there, went up to Florida State for undergrad, in North Miami at St. Thomas for law school. And then, and it kind of kills the Knoll fans there, but went up to Florida for my LLM in tax after law school, and then settled down here in Southwest Florida in 2006. So been practicing in the trust and estates area since then. We have my own firm with my partner, John Sarrett Price, and we do all of the planning, administration, and estate and income tax planning for trust and estates as well. So a lot of our clients come down from the north. Particularly, there are really two big migrations in recent history here. After the SALT deduction was eliminated in 2017, that seemed to kind of solidify a lot of clients to make Florida their home base and sell their northern property. And then, of course, after COVID. So COVID was a big migration down here. Real estate prices soared, real estate inventory dried up. And what we're seeing now in 2025 is kind of the cooling a little bit, with some folks even trying to sell their homes that have appreciated, or even kind of rebuy a northern home. So for our snowbirds, particularly here in Florida, the appeal is no state income tax, no state estate tax, relatively affordable sales tax. Of course, Florida gets most of its money from tourism, and property tax. And even there's bills that are likely going to be proposed in the next legislative session to even roll back property taxes here in Florida as well. So a lot of tax incentives to be a Floridian. Like we were talking about before we began, hurricanes are kind of our major disruption. But fortunately, we're pretty blessed.
Snowstorms, your house is still here. I mean, we get these things, but...
That's very true. For our area, the biggest impact recently was Hurricane Ian in 22. So that significantly impacted our coastal areas. But good news is still recovering and rebuilding. So from our coastal areas, that's a challenge. But other than that, it's chasing sunshine and 70-degree weather. And I think the snowbirds, the folks that spend half the year here and up north, have it right.
So I think one of the number one questions that I get asked a lot, especially by business owners, is about getting Florida residency and what the rules are around that residency requirement.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I always say it's very easy to become a Florida resident. From our perspective, there's the objective factors and subjective factors. The subjective is kind of harder to prove, but it's basically your intent to make Florida your domicile or reside here. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to own a home here, but you have to intend to make Florida your domicile. The objective factors that we always recommend clients do is get your driver's license in Florida, register your cars in Florida. If you have a local bank that's only unique to your northern state, transfer your assets to either a Florida bank or a national bank like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, etc. File your income tax returns with your Florida address. Forward, make your mail forwarded to Florida as your main address as well. So it's easy from the Florida perspective. What the harder thing and where we work hand in hand with our clients, counsel and accountants, from their, I call it their departing state, is to make sure you file and you do the things that you have to do to not be a resident in that northern state. So for instance, if you have to be present in Florida for 6 months and a day, make sure that you are, out of your northern state for that 6 month and a day. Oftentimes with audits, particularly from like the New York State, they'll look at credit card receipts or travel logs. So we often recommend to, keep good records. Had some clients that have said, we're staying on the border in Pennsylvania, counting down the time before we're actually going back into New York and retaining those receipts. Oftentimes it's more of a function of income tax. So you want to make sure that you're either filing a partial year resident return, non-resident return, make those your returns, your final returns. But ultimately, the state that you're departing from will determine, source income and your residency for income tax purposes. So that's really, we can assist to become a Florida resident here, but it's often hand in glove with counsel and accountants from up north that we work with to make sure the departure is clean.
One of the other issues that pops up, especially these days with things like Airbnb, and I have a close personal friend. She actually inherited some property from her parents, but now what she's going to end up with is New York property, North Carolina property, and Florida property. For people who own property in other states, but they might end up passing away in Florida, I mean, what are the issues or the things that they should be thinking about that end up happening that they're probably not aware of?
So the major planning tool that we use for clients with property in multiple states is just your very basic revocable living trust. And so it's not a estate tax planning device, but it does help avoid probate in multiple states. So just kind of out of the gate, if you have a client that has property in North Carolina and they're a Florida resident, meeting with their estate planning attorney to establish that revocable trust and transfer that North Carolina property to the trust. And the same thing with the New York property as well. Using LLCs may be advantageous as well. But basically, the idea is avoid probate. Now, that doesn't necessarily avoid the imposition of state estate tax that may result in that property, that situs in New York, for instance, from being subject to New York estate tax. But again, that non-residency should result in excluding non-New York assets from the New York taxable estate. So that's, just as out of the gate, the trust planning is what we would recommend initially.
Does it matter what state you form the trust in?
Yeah, you're permitted to form trust in almost any state. From Florida, we have a robust trust code. I can imagine with the number of folks that come down here to retire. Florida's pretty much on the forefront of using devices similar to where, some folks may say, oh, I want a Delaware trust. Well, we have a very good trust code here in Florida. We adopted the Uniform Trust Code. A lot of the amendments that come up with the Uniform Trust Code are adopted by the legislature as well. And we have a pretty robust body of case law and trust law as well. So if you're a Florida resident, there's not a whole big reason to need to establish a trust in another jurisdiction unless you're searching for something like a domestic asset protection trust, which unfortunately we don't have that in Florida. That's unique to other states like South Dakota, Nevada, Alaska, etc.
So another thing that pops up, as you know, we do a lot of work with skilled nursing facilities. People do some Medicaid type planning. And I think a concern or a question that I see people have a lot of the time is, so lived in New York my whole life. My kids are here. I moved to Florida, but I have a health event, but I'm now a Florida resident, and the kids try to move me back to New York for skilled nursing care. And so then they start getting into these weird things about Medicaid because of the county rules. I mean, how do you counsel or advise clients who might have questions about that?
So I look at it from the perspective of, for instance, if you have a client that has like if you owned your homestead here in Florida, your primary residence, you have that as a creditor protected asset here in Florida. you can retain that creditor protection so long as you have the intent to return if you were able, right? So even though you have a medical event and you're maybe in a facility elsewhere, provided that, absent being in that facility or that medical event, you have that intent to return to and reside, you can retain your Florida homestead. So from Florida's perspective, you can still avail yourself of the benefits of Florida residency with particulars related to, which Medicaid do I qualify for, whether it's Florida or New York. That's, likely going to be the threshold question, right? And then which state has the right to recover assets in the event of a death and being on Medicaid. So, from the perspective of being moved north to be on Medicaid in New York, and you can help me out on this. I think you got to be a New York resident to qualify for that New York Medicaid, right?
Yeah, they're going to want you to have some situs location here, so that ends up posing a little bit of an issue, but people end up finding a way to come back. But then questions always arise about, now does that make it so that my estate and I'm pulling assets back here for probate purposes?
Right.
And so I guess that's where the trust might come in to help out with that.
Correct. Yeah, and even with Medicaid planning, and that's not something that we typically engage in within our firm, but we have a pretty robust referral network for that. The irrevocable transfer of assets to like a Medicaid trust that you self-settle and you wait out your exclusion period can help aid in that clawback, so to speak. So if there's kind of this idea like it's we want to preserve assets for the next generation, we're comfortable being in a Medicaid facility. Maybe that's an avenue to take to plan to preserve assets there as well.
So if I had a Rochester business owner that's moving to Naples and they're looking to sell their business and they came to you with two questions: what lure should I use for snook fishing? And then also, when should I sell my business, before or after my residency? How would you answer those questions?
First question, and I'm kind of borrowing some knowledge here from my wife, is it's probably
she is a good fisher one.
Yep.
Rebecca's pretty good.
Probably a silver spoon or a gold spoon, maybe for snook.
Good choice.
Yeah, I think that would work. And then, I'm sorry, what was the second question? I got hung up on.
More important one, I guess, is from the business side. They're looking to sell their business, and when should they do it? And actually, what triggered some of this was, as we had that $1.7 billion Powerball recently, there was a whole bunch of news shows on up here where there was a lawyer who knew that you could specialize in lottery funds. Like this guy, his practice specializes in being a lottery lawyer. I've been a lawyer for a long time, never heard of this guy. But one of the big things was talking about trying to get your residency before you're cashing that, and using the timelines that are involved before you have to cash the ticket. So a lot of business owners, they're moving to the villages. It's a popular spot. They start wanting to look to sell that company. What should they be doing first? What are some of the best ways to maximize their tax savings?
Well, it's insofar as your Florida residency, to make sure you have enough time between, call it a sales event and actually establishing residency. I think that the major issue, again, since we're a tax-friendly state in Florida, there's not a big issue.
We are not. We are a taxing-friendly state.
Right. So that's where I think you want to make sure that you have enough, call it temporal proximity or time between establishing a residency and the sale of the business. So if you're under contract and you're going to close in a week and you say, gee, I need to go become a Florida resident, I don't know that New York would look at that very favorably, right?
No.
So, if there's a thought or time horizon to say in the next 3 years, I want to have a liquidation event and try to mitigate, some of that, state income tax associated with the sale, I'd say, just do the things that we discussed about your objective factors to become a Florida resident. As far as the transfer even of a business to Florida, you're, again, the source income issues are going to be the major, rub on the New York side, right? So even though if you say we're going to make this, we're going to domesticate the New York corporation in Florida, but all of our manufacturing is done in Rochester, you're probably not going to escape that New York level taxation. If you have some ability to, take the management part of the business and move that to Florida, so that you kind of limit the sale of the assets or the manufacturing component to just New York, you can do that over a time horizon there too. But really, from that side, I'd say a good plan is a plan well executed with enough time between the residency and the sale event so that you can hopefully mitigate some of that tax bite from the New York side.
Now, Beth, are you getting ready to move yourself down to Florida, given that your daughters are all looking to become Floridians?
Well, it's interesting, and I don't know if you know this about some of the universities down there, but if you have a grandparent that resides in Florida, you get out-of-state tuition waived. But, you also hear in your travels as your kids graduate that, the kids will go become residents of a state, or parents will establish residency in a particular state. Do you ever see people doing it because Florida's in-state tuition is a lot less expensive than New York's in-state tuition.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So in order to do that, and again, each unit, I think and we were looking at this for a client the other day, is you have to, I think you got to divest yourself of being a dependent on your parents' tax return in order to be a resident, right? For being a student. And then you have to reside here and provide proof of residency. I think it's for 12 months, so that you can then reapply for in-state tuition. It's a popular thing. Some parents like the deduction that they get for claiming a dependent and would prefer to pay that tuition. I can say, just even as if there's folks that are thinking of moving down here to Florida with children that are minors thinking about the university, we do have something called the Florida prepaid program, which is you basically lock in today's tuition for paying it either over 18 years, 5 years, or in lump sum.
Wow.
And then that student, there's a variety of plans, but the student can then go to any Florida college or university at that tuition rate, and it's prepaid. We also have like the Bright Future Scholarship, where if you attain a certain score on the SAT, ACT, and then have a certain grade point average, then you get basically 75% or 100% your tuition paid for as well.
That.
So
how does Florida afford all of this?
we love,
and New York apparently
Florida.
doesn't, even with all the taxes.
That is a long, lengthy discussion, perhaps for another day. But, at the same time, I think we want to be conscious. There are 3 lawyers in the room.
Yes.
We always be billing. We don't want to overstay our welcome to some extent. But at the same time, Chris, I guess if there's one thing that you could recommend, if you're a business owner, a person thinking about how to shift to Florida and their estate plan, what's the right mindset that they should have, or what questions should they be thinking about? Because we do get posed this quite a bit.
Okay. Main issue is commit to making that change. I think where we see problems is where somebody wants to say, I'm going to be a Florida resident, buys the home, applies for the homestead exemption, and then leaves Florida to go back to New York for 11 months. And then says, I'm a Florida resident. Well, you're probably going to have a problem from Florida if you're claiming that homestead exemption, and then probably also from the New York side if you're so the commit in and the compliance with actually being away from that home state for the 6 months and a day is necessary, and then ensuring that you have a plan, and I say the plan meaning that if you still retain property in New York, plan for the state estate tax within your plan. There's nothing wrong with having counsel in both states working together. I always say that the client's the captain of the ship, and we're just working on their behalf to make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction, so to speak. So having good counsel, making sure everybody's apprised of what the plan is, whether it's to move or a sale of a business. And just kind of plan for the unexpected, because that provides you and your family the peace of mind that you need in the event something unthinkable happens.
I think those are great tips. And just so you know, I am talking to the 2 guys I go fishing with about trying to make a trip to Florida. So I may be in touch before too long.
Well, if
anyway. For fishing, clearly, it's a problem.
I was going to say there's maybe some ability to, if there's a business purpose, to write it off, right? Or at least
there we go. We can talk about that and making them Florida residents.
Yeah. That's beyond the scope of the conversation today.
Yes.
Well, as always,
Like, share, subscribe, and thank you, Chris, so much.
good
All
seeing
right. Thank you all too. It's been a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.